Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ankahi. Today we have Mishma. She's an activist, mental health advocate, and someone who strongly believes in creating resilient communities. She is the co-founder of Converse and Cook, which we will hear more about during our chat. She has always been vocal about the injustices and dissected the nuances of political and social issues in Canada. And last but not the least, she's a fabulous writer, and I'm a huge fan of hers. Mishma, welcome to Ankahi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Before we begin with any of the questions, I just wanted to know, you are from Bangladesh, right? So, yeah. And you weren't born here. So why don't you start with when you guys moved and how that transition was for you guys?
Sure. So actually, my parents, like my mom's from India, my dad's from Bangladesh. I was born in Canada, but I've had like a very interesting relationship with, the motherland and all of that. So my dad immigrated here when he was, in his early 20s, and then went back home, married my mom, and then, the whole shebang, like the typical immigrant story, right? You come here
back and forth,
Exactly. You come here to build a better life. And so I was born in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Nice. Interesting.
I only lived there for about 2 to 3 years. So I have no recollection of my life. At that point, I was a baby. But then we moved to Ontario, and in Ontario, we moved back and forth quite a bit. So my dad has, his cousins who lived in Hamilton at the time, or Hamilton, Ontario.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any other family here. This was early 90s. So didn't have any family in Canada. So he kind of left to be closer to them. And then within Ontario, though, we moved back and forth a lot, again, because it's, the immigrant struggle too, of just trying to find footing. Your education credentials don't transfer over in the same way.
For sure,
so my dad, back home had a master's in economics and stats, and was he was a banker at one point, a professor at one point, and then he came here, and he was initially the primary breadwinner, so he worked he told me, $7 an hour sometimes, and so I
mean, they have to start from scratch, right? No matter what their educational background is, because it's all back home.
Exactly. And so, I was born in 1995, and then 5 years later in 2000, my sister Raisa was born.
Yeah.
And then, so when Raisa was born, we were in St. Catharines in Ontario. And that was when my dad was just working, at a restaurant.
Yeah.
And then he realized that, we don't need to be struggling this hard, because fortunately for us at the time, my dad's family back in Bangladesh, they were really doing well off. My grandpa was a really successful businessman, and then my uncles were really, really smart in expanding the businesses. And so my dad was like, what's the point of struggling so much here when we can go back? And
you weigh both sides, right? And it's hard to make a decision at that point.
Exactly. And just live a decent life. So in 2000, when I was in junior kindergarten, so for the Ontarians in the world, in Alberta right now, we don't have a junior or senior kindergarten, but in Ontario, I was in junior kindergarten, finished, I think I finished, or I might've been midway through. I don't remember. My family decided to pack up, and my sister and I, and mom and dad, we decided to move to Bangladesh, right? So we sold all of our material possessions here, moved to Bangladesh. We were there for about 9 or 10 months. And it was just definitely not I was 5 or 6 years old at the time. And I still have memories, right? I still have memories that was just a really traumatic period of adjusting as a child, because I had just learned to speak English fluently in school, right? I was just learning that, and now we're back home, and now I'm learning to read and write in Bangla, and I felt so behind, and I was back, and I was always used to being the really, smart kid in school. I was only in kindergarten. I mean, I had a year under my belt, but when we went there,
but the school systems are completely different too.
It's so different. But I was I don't remember the learning aspect so much, but I just remember my family saying I was really quick to catch on to things, and I was doing pretty well. But I remember this one incident really clearly, where I had a classmate who, he's just a 6-year-old boy who was just super rambunctious and liked to talk and make people laugh. And
he stands out, right? Then
he was a goofy kid, but he wasn't really in tune with like what was happening in the class. And I remember we sat together and I don't know what he was doing. I think he was just like not listening or talking while the teacher was talking. And, you know, she like took him aside and took the ruler and like, you know, smacked his hand. And I'm sure it wasn't hard or anything like that, but like, it was definitely something that was really hard to like see, because I immediately started crying because I was like, whoa, where I'm
it's traumatizing for everyone who witnesses something like that.
Exactly. Like where I'm from in Canada, like no, the teacher never even raised their voice, right?
Yeah.
So to like see such a huge difference between like, not only are they like yelling, but they're actually like physically punishing a child for just being a child, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
After that, I just refused to go to school. Like I was like, Dad, Mom, like I'm not going back. There's no way that's happening. And so I stopped going to school. And then my sister had some health, you know, concerns. She was a baby too. So there was just like a lot, like she wasn't adjusting to the climate or the food or all of that. So after about 9 or 10 months of living there, you know, my dad was like, I can't, like I came here to like give my children a better life. Like they're not like, if I have like my eldest who like refuses to go to school in grade 1, like she's dropping out, and you know, my baby's not even like eating well. There's no point of us staying here. So we picked up, we left again, and then we lived in Ontario, started again basically from scratch.
From scratch,
at this point, you know, my parents had made some good family friends, you know, from the beginning, who have become family, you know, even to this day are basically family. And yeah, we lived there for a while. And then when I was 12 years old, we moved to Edmonton, Alberta, and that's where I've been since. So yeah, that's kind of like, I've been back East Coast, West Coast multiple times throughout my life, but like Edmonton is really where I call home, just because I've been here from age 12 and now I'm 26. And so my whole life,
the prime years of your life were spent
exactly
there.
I did the bulk of my growing up here, but yeah, interesting relationship with the different countries and places in my life for sure. That's
very interesting. How do you think the community is in Alberta, and how do you, as a South Asian woman, navigates in that community?
You know, it's interesting because in Ontario, specifically in Hamilton, where I grew up, like there's a lot of Bengalis, like, you know, and lots of South Asian people, not just Bengalis. So it's very common to be in a classroom with like a bunch of brown people, a bunch of, you know,
my high school, you wouldn't even feel like you're in Canada, because it felt like I was back home.
Yeah, exactly. So there's just so much, like, you know, I remember like growing up in Hamilton, I had Black friends and brown friends and, you know, white friends too, but like the ones that stick out are the ones, like, it was such a multicultural, diverse group.
Yeah.
And then immediately moving to Edmonton, like I came here at the end of the 2 weeks of grade 6. So like I don't even touch on that experience much, because then there was 2 weeks, whatever. But like junior high, I was one of the only brown girls until grade 9. So it was one of the only brown girls.
Stressful.
It was, you know, it's interesting because I think like I went to an all-girls school in junior high. Shout out to my Nellie McClung alumni. But it was honestly like, I think for sure, like I definitely noticed the fact that there's not a lot of diversity. Like for sure there was no other, you know, brown people to like connect to. Yeah. But like, because it was an all-girls school, because it was all about like female empowerment, I think like my sense of community was really rooted and not, it kind of shifted from really like noticing myself as like a South Asian woman, like that role almost took a bit of a sideline, and it became more about like, I'm a woman and I need to, you know, so it was a different type of thing. And so, yeah, like I would say for sure, like it would have been a bigger culture shock, I think, if I went to a co-ed school where now all of a sudden, like, I'm very aware that I'm the only brown woman. But because I went to an all-girls school, it was, you know, it was kind of, I don't know how good this is or bad this is, but like race didn't really come into play as much. But also I was like a 10, 12-year-old kid. I didn't really think about these things. But yeah, it definitely growing up. And then as I got older, you know, you start to realize more about like, oh, there's so much discrepancy here, because like I have so many more white friends now and they can do all of these things that like I can't do. Like, you know, like I can't just say like get a cell phone at like age 10 and start texting my friends. I didn't get my first cell phone until grade 10, which even then, like I know a lot of people didn't even get their first cell phone until university, you know? So it's like, there are like these weird things, are like curfews, right? Like my friends would be like, let's go to the mall. And even going to the mall, I had to like, ask weeks in advance if I could go.
I can totally relate.
Exactly. Like I didn't know how to bus, and my parents didn't feel comfortable like getting their 11-year-old kid.
Like it was a whole event that you had to plan in advance.
It was an ordeal. And at like 10, 11 years old, you're like, why can't I just like do what they're doing? So there's a lot of growing up where like, it was more of like, because I didn't really notice my race, it was a resentment towards that.
Yeah.
Like, why can't I just be like everybody else?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it was definitely a strange phenomenon. Like I think back now and I'm like, it would have been really nice to have a friend that I felt was like rooted to their cultural identity, because I went from like
more relatable.
It's such a normal part of my life
to
not really even thinking about it, not even really like trying to associate with it. Not until like way later on, I would say even in university, is when I was starting to like more so be like, no, I am a brown woman. I'm a brown Muslim woman. I'm Bengali. Like there's so much more to me than just being like, a woman. So yeah, those layers came into effect a lot later in my life. But Edmonton, back then at least was very white. At least where I grew up, it was very white. It was very it was strange.
I guess, and, just in general, right? Like if you compare Edmonton to Ontario, it will always be, less diverse.
Absolutely. I mean, I think for sure it's getting, now that I've grown up here and I know the different pockets and communities, like I've been very fortunate to meet like some of the most amazing people, and people of all colors, and all orientations. And it's been really amazing. But like, absolutely. Like whenever my family or like friends from back in Ontario or any part of the world really like come here, they're just like, dang, it's like so white. There's like there's no brown people here. And I'm like, it's interesting, because I for sure think that that's changed in the last little while. But I think for kids who grew up here, who were born here, grew up here from a really young age, like I do feel for them, because I don't know that they're necessarily thinking about race in the same way that they will start to hopefully later down the road. But because of that, there's just such a detachment of like, you don't even think that your race really plays a factor when it does.
Then it does,
It's really insidious in the sense where like you're not acknowledging who you are. You're not acknowledging, your skin color. And I'm not saying you always have to, but like it is a part. It's something to be celebrated. It's there, and it's something to be celebrated. And unfortunately, it's something that people still use as an attack or to weaponize, right? And so when you don't really make those connections, like it can be really hard to like not sit in resentment and not hate your culture.
I can see where that's coming from. I think I've been really lucky in that way, because I moved here in grade 8, and then grade 9, high school began, and then my high school was all brown. So I almost never had to, think that, oh, I'm in a white country or I'm in a foreign country, because I was always surrounded by people from the culture who understood where I'm coming from, who understood, the cultural issues that we have. Right. So I think I've been really lucky in that way. And then I'm in Mississauga, and Mississauga is full of brown people and Muslim people. So, you almost never feel like, oh, I'm a Muslim in a non-Muslim country, right? So I've never had to think about that. But now talking to you, it feels like, that was really a privilege, right? Where all my life I would just think, okay, this is normal, but it's not normal.
Yeah, it's very strange to grow up thinking that your practices at home or the way you live at home is different. And so I think that's been like, now I'm fully embracing it, right? Like there was a time where like I didn't even want to, like I didn't like inviting friends over, because I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna like smell these things, they're not gonna know how to eat my food, they're all gonna complain that it's like too spicy or too blah blah blah. So it's like there's a lot of my life that I feel like I had to like really divide. And like I wouldn't let my closest friends into my culture, and vice versa. And I wouldn't let my family meet my closest friends, because I just was like, I don't know what the world is going to look like when those two worlds collide, and I don't know how I'm going to deal with that. And that caused a lot of anxiety that I didn't even realize again until like later on in my life, later on in high school, later on in university. So it's still something that I'm like working on now. But
at least you acknowledged it.
Exactly. And certainly now it's like, this is a huge part of my life, so it's like, I can't hide that from the people I care about, and I don't want to hide it from the people I care about. So no,
that's definitely a huge leap in the growth process. So it's definitely going towards betterment. How do you feel the brown community is in Edmonton now? I mean, you've interacted with so many people. Do you think it's similar to what we have back home? Do you think it's as intense, concentrated? Do you think the way people, perceive your each other and, lifestyle choices, do you think they're different because we're in a different country and, their mindsets are different? Or do you think it's still very much like what we have back home?
That's an interesting question because, despite there being a lot more diversity in Edmonton, myself personally and my family personally, like we're not super involved with like a large South Asian Bengali community in Edmonton. We used to be very like, especially I think the difference between here and there, like here in Ontario, is that typically you have a lot of family in Ontario. I mean, I don't know about yourself, but like right now, like when my dad first moved to Ontario, he had one cousin or maybe two cousins. And now I would say like a lot of my cousins, a lot of my mom's side, especially, and now my dad's side, live in Ontario. So I think like people kind of flock towards their own, right? So you like the communities are more heightened in that sense because you have more loyalties to your family, your close, your family friends who you've like almost shared that struggle with. And so it's different for me because I grew up in Ontario where I felt like there were at times like very toxic mentalities, but at the same time, like it's really hard to like not have community that's like in Ontario. I felt like it was very loyal. It was very loyal. Like it was toxic, but it was also just like you knew that people were going to come through for you no matter what, right? But again, like the double-edged sword being that like you're under a microscope. And like I was only 12 years old, so like of course like I didn't really experience firsthand like being the topic of discussion. And like I'm really lucky, like my mom and dad are also very much of the sort of like try to stay out of drama, try not to stir drama, but like it was certainly there. And I still remember like the residual, like just the gossip culture, right? And moving to Edmonton, like we definitely have like a handful of like close family friends, but like these are family friends that like when I was born in like Vancouver, they were also in Vancouver. Then we moved to Ontario together. So it's like, they're not Edmonton friends. They've always been part of my life.
So it's like, friends that eventually become family.
And they are, right? So it's like, for me, it's just an extension of my family. And I don't really, frankly, I'm like super, super involved with the Bengali community in Edmonton specifically because, for the first few years of living here, again, I didn't really acknowledge the fact that I wasn't thinking about my race.
I mean, you were just a child, culture. Right? When you were thrown into this environment.
Exactly. And like, my parents came and they both started working like right away too. So it's a tough question because like I'm sure that someone else who's like really heavily involved in the community can give a better answer. But for me personally, I think in terms of toxicity, I haven't experienced it very much here. Of course, there's still like the mentality of like, don't do this, don't wear this.
It's somewhat still there.
Yeah, like don't say this, don't present yourself in a way because people are gonna know and people are gonna talk. But it's like, who are the people? Because I don't really know them. Ontario, like every summer up until like COVID, I would go back and that's when it's really heightened, right? It's like, oh my gosh, don't wear this. And like you're going to this person's house. So like make sure that you're like, you present yourself this way. So like, it's a weird adjustment, like going back and forth just to see like, I'll be walking down the street in Hamilton or Toronto or something, and we run into like 3 Bengali families that we know. Whereas like here, that's not gonna happen. Like here, I'm sure I bump into a lot of Bengalis, but I don't know them, right? So,
I think just to add to that, we don't have any family here, but we have a lot of friends who have become family over time, and we're all very tight. So I think it's. And we're still, I'm still in touch with family back home. My aunt, I'm very close to her, so I talk to her a lot and, discuss a lot of things with her. So I think it's almost better to have friends who become family because they know they're just there at the perfect distance. They're not in your business, but they're there for you. So I think that's, I really like that. And also none of them have their families here either, right? So we just sort of became each other's family.
Right.
And I think to me, that's, I cherish that a lot more at times than I cherish my own family because they're respectful. with, your personal issues, because, they don't consider themselves blood relatives.
Right.
At the same time, they want to be there for you because they've known you for so long. So I like that, about the community here. But I do get that there is toxicity in certain groups that I've never been a part of that. But there's a lot of competition in certain groups. There's a lot of gossiping, backbiting, and things like that. But alhamdulillah, we're not part of that. We've never been exposed to that, but I know it exists.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about expectations. How do you think, I feel like as a South Asian woman, especially in Canada or, anywhere in North America, there are just so many layers of expectations, right? There are expectations from the community, which is, not the South Asian community. Then there are the South Asian community. Then there are your own families. And then just being a woman has so many expectations attached. So how do you juggle with all of that?
I mean, that's a great question. And I still I'm sure my answer will change as time progresses, because it's, how do you juggle? I don't know. I don't think I've mastered that yet, right? Because it's, as the years progress, I think my roles change, and the emphasis on different roles are more important some years than others. So, I mean, I think everyone's unique too, because everyone uniquely carries their own burdens and successes and, whatever you might call them. For me personally, I'm the firstborn. So that in itself comes with a lot
of daughter.
Eldest daughter, again, I think it shapes you in a different way, because we talked about, with South Asian families in particular, it's such a collectivist mentality, right? So it's you always put your family, you're supposed to always put your family before yourself. And so I grew up with that a lot, and it was emphasized even more so, when my father passed away a couple years ago. And so definitely the roles change, right? Because now I'm not only just the eldest daughter, but I'm also the eldest sister. I have two siblings who are younger than me. And it's not that this was shoved down my throat or anything, but I definitely feel
you have responsibility.
And we don't really have a sibling relationship, more so than I feel I'm a caregiver to them, right? And it's not it's such a huge age difference. My sister's only 5 years younger than me, but certainly towards my brother, especially, who's 17 now, but 9 years younger than me. I just feel a different attachment towards them. I'm sure that my other friends, in a normal situation might not, because I'm not their mom, but I feel I worry about them similar to how a parent would, right? When my sister is out for too long, I know my mom would be on it and texting, but I'm also texting her being where are you? Why aren't you coming home? And I certainly see myself falling into these patterns that I never thought I would 5-6 years ago. So it's different. And I think there's, again, it comes with again, being the firstborn, and now almost in a partnership with my mom, right? Where
with
it's
your mom,
kind of both. I mean, obviously more so her than me, but it's taking on a new role of and responsibility.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
How are we supporting each other? How are we supporting this household? And now we have these two, younger people to look out for and care about. And it's unique and it's different. And I think for everyone it changes. And like I said, year to year, I think the emphasis changes for me. So this year is more about the financial expectation, and it's not being put on me, but it's something that I think about a lot, because my mom's getting older and I don't want her to be working forever, feeling she has to. So there's a lot of just different things that you juggle with. And I didn't ever think that this would be something that I would be thinking about.
I mean, it's just where life has taken you.
Exactly, where life has taken me, and it's a new thing. And now it's just being a couple years post graduating and in the workforce, it's almost just okay, so where is my career taking me? And so there's just a lot of these different things. And then again, being a minority, being a person of visible color, especially somewhere in Edmonton, where
that has been my concern too. Yeah,
it's very white. So it's almost just it's all these little things and all these little microaggressions that sometimes I don't even realize are there until I'm in that situation. And so it's just sometimes a lot to think about. And so it's tricky. And I think that's how I've compartmentalized it, focusing on one role at a time. but yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just a lot, right? Like
No,
there's a
no,
lot of different roles.
it does for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get that. And then also the fact that you're in your 20s, your mid 20s, which are supposed to be like, a crucial part of your life, regardless of everything else. I've been having those experiences myself, and it's just a lot to take sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot. And I still just like, I can't even think about the next chapter until like I figure out this one. And frankly, like, I don't know that anyone ever does figure it out, right? Like the 20s are supposed to be very tumultuous, and it's a lot. Like you just graduate school, for those of you who like for those of us who picked school or whatever, right? Like you're figuring out what you want to do for your job. You're figuring out if you want to get married or like have a partner or start your family or maybe not. And so there's just a lot of different things that like, I just know for me personally where I'm at right now, like I can't even start thinking about whatever that next chapter is until I figure out this one, because I'm like, I can't take on more and I can't put myself in like another role until I am comfortable with the ones that I've
need to settle these things first,
exactly.
Until the dust settles. I think one of the things I realized is that I don't know if it's like a South Asian thing or if it's like, that's how all communities think, but your 20s, it's just like 10 years, and it's just, it's not enough time to figure everything out, right? We're expected to figure out our careers, we're expected to find our partners, and ideally in a South Asian family, you're supposed to have kids too, all before 30. And that's too much. Things don't work out that way. I mean, for some people it does work out, but for the most part, it doesn't. It's not really an ideal situation. I think we need to start opening more avenues that, okay, it's okay if some of that bleeds into your 30s. I think there's just that age pressure as well. So
I feel that a lot. And I think, I think like you said, like there's some people who are absolutely ready for it, and kudos to them. But I think more and more the world is, I don't want to say it's like stunted the growth of a lot of people, but like, right now, if you look at the job economy, like now you can't really get a job unless you have like all these extra credentials, and that takes time and money and resources. And so it really depends on person to person. But like, we're also now in a world where like women hopefully aren't just like there to like not go to school and not have a career. Like the expectation on women especially has changed so much. And like, I'm glad it's moving in that direction. But like, how is a woman supposed to do all this school, do all this like very laborious, intensive schooling and all of this, and then have a career, and then while they're juggling that, have a family? Like, I think there's like these two ideal roles that people want women to have. So either like again, like being in a South Asian family where like the firstborn and education is so important. It's like, I'm supposed to have a really successful job and career and be financially stable, all while getting married and having kids. And I'm like, you can't do that, because when you have kids, you need to take a break from work, right? So
for sure,
and I have like a heap load of student loans and debt that I need to pay off first. So it's like, how am I supposed to buy a house, have kids, do all this stuff, and then still have a career? And like, some people can do it, but I think more often than not, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with waiting. And frankly, right now, some people might not choose to have children for the foreseeable future. And I also feel like those people should not be shamed for that, because I'm certainly on that boat where I don't think that's in my cards, and maybe that'll change. But like, as I stand right now at 26 years old, and like, I can't even think about the possibility of children, because there's so much that I need to do first, just to, again, like with debt, that's a huge thing. Like, that's a priority, because I don't want to be in more debt. And like, again, for some other people, the priority might be children, and the debt, they'll figure out later, and that's totally fine. But these roles and expectations of women, and with the changing world, is like, at some point something needs to give, and you can't have this traditional like milestones by your 30s.
Like, it's a pre-decided template that doesn't really fit everyone.
It doesn't, because it's almost like we now have two very like competitive things that are full-time jobs in and of itself, and we're supposed to do it at the same time and do it well. And it just, I don't know who can do that.
I think what you said about children is very, very important. I feel like I'm glad more girls are actually accepting this and then acknowledging that I do not want children, and it doesn't make you any less of a woman, right? Like I feel like a lot of women who did have children in the past, maybe some of them didn't really want to, but they had to because of societal pressure. Right. And then that relationship with their children, it just, it starts off rocky. So how do you expect it to, flourish in the future? And I've seen so many relationships being damaged because, they were unwanted, right? So I think it's really, really important to have that clarity. Just because you're a woman doesn't mean you by default want kids. I know I do, but not like regardless of who I marry, I don't want to have kids right away. And maybe I won't, right? Depends on who I end up marrying.
And it needs to be your choice 100%. Like it shouldn't be out of, especially children and marriage, like that shouldn't be out of obligation. Like that needs to be your choice because that's a significant part of your life. And especially with children, that is your commitment. That is your responsibility. And like, like once you bring a child into the world, like that's on you at that point. And that's a lot to deal with, especially if that's not something you wanted to begin with. Like, but at the end of the day, like that's not any fault of that child's, right?
Exactly. So and it's not just like, providing for them, but also making sure that, their mental health is secure, right? It's not just that, I can pay for their food. I can pay for their accommodation.
Yeah. There's so much. And that's why it's like, I think people are having those conversations, hopefully, but like they need to be more normalized and they need to be more integral, right? Because it's this thing about children is not like, do you just want them or not want them? You have to think about everything that means and how that's going to change in your life, So I personally think both partners should only have kids when they really, really want it. Like, they're willing to do anything and everything to bring a child. Only then that child will be celebrated. And knowing what having children actually entails too. Like that's a big one with your partner. Like it's not just financially a big step, but it's also like you said, the mental attachment. There's just so much.
It's an emotional roller coaster, right? Like I haven't had kids, but I've seen my friends have them and I've seen them. It's crazy.
It's insane. And like my best friend right now, she's pregnant and she's going to have her first child in December. And I'm like sitting here, like my mind is blown because I've known this person for so many years. And I never, like, I'm so happy for her because, initially I don't think that was like a planned pregnancy per se. I don't know. But it was certainly a surprise to everybody.
Yeah.
But just seeing how happy and excited both her and her partner are, and like just to be around that energy, I'm like, maybe things will change, when you're with the right person or even if you're not with somebody, when you choose, like, this is what I need in my life.
Yeah.
You don't need to have a partner to have a child, right? So it's like, there's so many different ways that you can go about it. But like, my friend is pregnant. I have another friend getting married in August. And I'm just sitting here like, I'm so happy that these people that I love so much are reaching these milestones. But on the flip side, like they're also so excited for me as I'm like navigating my own milestones, whether that's my career, my first house that I just bought. So it's like, you need to surround yourself with people that celebrate your milestones, because even if they're different, right? Like,
for sure. I mean, I think that's how it should be, right? Only then it's authentic.
Absolutely.
Otherwise it's a rat race.
Absolutely. And so we're all excited about celebrating these very different things, but they're all very like big points in our life that hopefully will happen for each of us at different points if we choose to do that. But like, it's just really nice to be around people who are just authentically, genuinely happy for you.
Yeah.
And I don't know that, especially in the South Asian culture, like, I don't know how much of it is always genuine and authentic.
Yeah.
Certainly it is for sure, but you always question whether or not everyone's going to be super happy for you, especially if it doesn't fit the mold. Because for me, I'm having, like when I decided to like work at my job, and if I ever think about going back to school, like my family's super, super excited and they want me to do more school. But then there's always like the offhand comment from someone, like some Billy, Joe, Bob, whoever.
Really I've had that too. Yeah. I mean, after I did my undergrad, I took a 3-year break and I was working in a school. And then because I really wanted to think, right, that if I really wanted to go to graduate school or not.
Yeah.
And when I finally made that decision, I went for it and I just graduated. And I was in school for 3 years. And then there were people who had issues because, I should be getting married now. And
right. And
why am I going back to school?
or if I'm like, moving up in my career, that I should think about like how much money I make, because, the man that you don't want to emasculate whoever your partner is. And
Exactly.
you want to just really be clear that that's never come from like my family or my family friends, but it's come from people that don't really know me. That don't really know.
I mean,
like,
it's mostly those people, right? Like who
exactly.
just
It's
make
this
comments.
like, it's this comment that's like, that's easy to make when you don't know somebody. But like at the end of the day, like if I get a job that gives me more money and I love doing it, I don't care like, what my partner's gonna feel. Like if they feel emasculated by that, then they need to do their own soul work, right? Because like I'm not gonna hinder my career and my choices because it's gonna make somebody feel like they need to be higher than me. Like you're either on equal footing emotionally, financially, you're not always going to be on that same page, and that's okay. Like I'm okay with that. I don't care if my partner makes
I'm okay with that too.
Than me. But like I know that that's not the case for everybody, but like it shouldn't be about the gender, like which gender is making more money. And I think that's where I have a huge issue with. And so my answer to those people whenever they make those comments is like, if those are the type of people that want to like pursue me, then I don't want them. Like at the end of the day, if someone's gonna like be not genuinely authentically excited for my life and my milestones, then I don't want that person.
I mean, you want to be with someone who celebrates you, right? And you celebrate them. And I think like even for my partner, I wouldn't want them to be in a job just because of money. I would want them to, work for their passions, right? Otherwise, they're just gonna run low on the fuel very early on. So I wouldn't expect that. It's always teamwork, whether it's, finances or like, creating a support system or whatever it is. I think as long as you can work together to make something work, that's all that's needed.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of partners, it's how do you feel about, like, have you had that experience of just like, random people forwarding you profiles and
I feel, I don't want to generalize, but I feel like this is very much like a universal phenomenon for South Asian women, especially, is like I had a biodata made and I didn't even know that
I remember that story.
Like, it's so funny because actually there's two. So my great aunt made one, like a generic one for every cousin in the family. So that one exists somewhere in the world. I'm sure it's been there since I was like 18 years old. I've never seen that one. But like my mom was making one for me. This was like last year, maybe, or like a year and a half ago at some point. And she was on the phone with my cousin. And I didn't know this. So like I was at work and I just get an email from my cousin. And it's like a biodata. It's like a family tree. And I didn't know what it was initially because like my section is like 3 sentences and she left some of them blank because I'm like, Mom, you didn't know my height? Like my height was blank. So she's like, hey, can you fill out these blank pieces? So literally it was like my name, my occupation. They were just like, can you like actually formally fill out the job title and where you work and your height? And I'm like, and then the rest of it was just like my grandpas on both sides, my grandmas, like what they do, how many.
It's insane how some people actually care about that information.
You get like 3 sentences about you. I didn't even have a section to put in hobbies. Like my hobbies were pre-filled for me because my mom was like, you need to say you do this, this, and this. And it's just like, it's so funny because like I know my mom and like she has like the best intentions and she thought she was being so sneaky, but I'm like, you literally had my cousin email it to me to fill out the rest of the stuff. Of course I'm gonna catch on. And whatever. But like it was so fun to see her being so excited because she was going through like my Facebook and like picking out the best pictures. And, like honestly, I still don't know like the complete what that looks like. But like whatever. I think that's just like a rite of passage. Like everyone has that. I don't find it like I'm at a point in my life too right now where I'm just like, I'm not opposed to the idea of like my parents actively looking at, or like my family members like trying to poach partners for me. Like I don't think that's an issue because like I know that at least in my family, they've always been like, if we introduce you to someone, obviously you're going to get to know them and you make that decision.
Yeah, for
sure. So I'm just like, I don't know, like honestly, like the ideal situation is that like whoever, like if my mom finds somebody who she's genuinely like super excited about and like we like connect and our families click, then like I have nothing against like an arranged meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
marriage, I feel like it's different. Like the meaning
Yeah.
is that your parents and your families connect you, but then you have the choice of getting to know
Yeah.
that person, dating that person, and
Yeah.
then choosing whether or not you want to get
Yeah, it's
married.
just a matter of who introduces you to that person.
Exactly. And
It's
I'm
not like
totally open with that.
Yeah.
It's even like, honestly, it's even easier for me if my parents like introduce me to somebody, just because like here again, super white town, like it's really hard
Yeah.
to find like, you know, like a Muslim brown man. And I mean, I'm not tied to like race or ethnicity,
Yeah.
but like the religion aspect does matter. And then
Yeah.
you have to think about like the
The cultural.
yeah, like the cultural part. Like I think my mom is okay,
Mhm.
whoever it is, because like my primary thing is my partner needs to speak English, because like I can't really speak in a different like for me,
Yeah.
like I'm very much like my love language is words of affirmation and communication, and you know, quality time.
Yeah.
And for me, like conversations are what attracts me to somebody, and what
Yep.
keeps like what
I'm the
keeps it
same way.
very stimulating, right? And
Yeah.
so if I don't have that, or if there's a barrier in that, like I know that I won't be able to get there with a person.
Yeah.
So culturally, like I'm open to whoever, and this is a plug, like, well, I'm single, like whatever. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tough when you're trying to navigate that by yourself, because again, here, like your options are quite limited, and
Mhm.
it's also like I'm not necessarily practicing, so like the religion aspects matters to me because it's really important to my family.
Yeah.
But like I don't think I could be with somebody who's like very, very religious for the same reason as like I don't think that they could be with me, because
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily
It's the
very,
same
very
level of
practicing.
practice, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that's hard to find. It's like the compatibility is difficult, and I'm sure a lot of people agree. But yeah, long story short, I mean, I don't really mind if like the biodata thing is funny to me. Like it's a funny story. Especially because I know that there's no information about me. It's like my entire family
It's pretty
history.
basic,
And I'm like,
yeah.
whatever. And I got to learn a lot about my family history through this.
That's
And I
funny.
was like, it's a bonus, because I didn't
Yeah.
know there's so many people in this family. Like I don't know even all my first cousins. I'm like, there's so many of them that you lose track. So it's nice to have it all in one.
Yeah,
one
yeah,
list,
yeah.
you know?
It's
So,
really, yeah, it's interesting. My story is slightly different. So I don't think I've told you this, but I've been married before.
oh, no, I
And
didn't know.
yeah, and it's been 7 years or so. It was like something, you know, it didn't even last that long. Turns out the guy was forced, and I don't want to go into details right now, but because of that, now I have this label, right? That, oh, she's divorced. So I think because of that, when I'm getting profiles through, you know, the auntie network, it's always that, oh, because she's divorced, she would get the profile of a divorced guy.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't mind considering them, but you know, when you're only getting profiles of divorced guys, you connect the dots, right?
Yeah.
So
because that's the only option for you. I think that's a really interesting point, because like, because that's very different, I think, from the vibe of like North American, like typical North Americans, where it doesn't matter if you've been divorced or had a live-in partner or whatever, you know, like those aren't your only prospects. That would never cross someone's mind to only set you up with people who've had like a similar level of, you know, relationship status. So
so that's how I've felt through the auntie network. But I feel it, and I think it's the guys don't have a problem, but their moms do, or whoever is, you know, dealing with their profiles. So I think for me, like I've talked to guys on my own. So that avenue has worked out. Like I haven't found anyone yet, but you know, I think my experience has been much better in that respect than talking to people through, you know, my parents. And it's a lot of times people don't care what's going on, or like how old is the person, or what's their, you know, what they're like. And I personally don't like this approach, because it's like, for example, when my brother was looking, nobody sent him profiles of divorced girls, because he was never married before, right? So what I don't like is that they don't really know anyone, but they just make recommendations based on these statuses. Like I wouldn't recommend anyone, you know, unless I knew them somewhat, you know, like what they're looking for, what they like. But through the auntie network, it's
you would
always
base
been
it
like,
off of compatibility,
exactly,
and not basing compatibility off relationship status. And you know, it's especially with guys, I feel like it's also like, even if a man's been divorced before,
oh yeah,
I don't think
matter.
that their sole options and prospects would be divorced.
No. No,
So I
it
think
doesn't
the
matter.
double
Yeah, for
standard
them.
of that is also nothing, like, not to say that there's anything wrong with someone who's been divorced before, because sometimes
Yeah.
things just don't work out. But
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I'm
to
totally.
say that that's it,
Yeah.
and basing it off of just that, and like closing the door off of like people who are in the world who are totally fine with it, as they
Yeah.
should be, because frankly, like, I mean, again, I don't want to generalize, to each their own, but for me,
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know that would bother me, you know, but I know that for some people it might, for sure. But like, yeah, that's interesting. But like, it's interesting, especially because it's not necessarily a universal thing. It's only for women.
And then it's also interesting because I know there are certain guys who don't have a problem with it, but because the aunties in the network, they just don't think it's a good fit because of that.
It's the aunties that do it, which is
exactly
like the shitty part.
Like, why is it their calling?
Yeah. And why, as women, are you also doing this?
Yeah, I think that's one thing I realized. Like, as a woman, you should be understanding another woman more, if anything, right? But it seems like it's the opposite sometimes, which really, I think, makes it harder for our community. But only if those mindsets were flipped, it could really help our community flourish, right?
Yeah.
Almost at the 1 hour mark. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss?
I don't know. I think this is like a really great conversation. I'm excited to talk about some of these different topics with people who, like, it's not like a shock to their system when you say things like that, especially about like arranged marriages and biodatas. I think my friends have definitely come around to it, but it's certainly like, whoa, this happened, and you're like laughing about it, and I'm like, yeah, because it's funny. Like, it's not,
but like, I think in the other communities, for them, arranged, like, I feel like in today's world, even if our parents have only introduced us, like you said, arranged meeting, we call it arranged marriage, right? But I feel like in today's world, arranged marriage and love marriage aren't really that different, because if you met someone,
to know that person,
exactly, like, the process is the same. It's just a matter of how you got introduced to that person, right?
Exactly. And I told my friend, like, I was just talking to her yesterday, and she's trying to set me up on a blind date, and I'm just like, this is no different really than like my mom setting me up with somebody, right? Like, it's just like, you look out for people because you love them and you care about them and you want them to like explore that part. But like, yeah, so it's just, I think you're just having to like reframe how you like talk about it. But yeah, it's just nice to have a conversation and be like, oh my God, it's so good to not have to just like explain everything or get like a really like shocked reaction.
And I think, if anything, your parents just tend to know more people than you, right? Like, we know people because they're our friends, but our parents just tend to know families and their background and things like that.
And the family part is important too. Like, I think the older I get, it's like, I think it really also just depends on how close you are with your family. But like, my ideal partner needs to it's not even an option, but they need to be heavily involved with like my siblings, my mom, and all their lives, and like vice versa. I also need to be really, really involved, because it's not just about the person, it's about the families. And I know that's different for different people, but like, for me, that's a non-negotiable. Like, I'm a very family oriented person, and I can't imagine any world where I'm not super close with my in-laws and like, all of that, and vice versa. So no,
I think that's, even for me, one of the must-haves is that, what kind of relationship that person would have with my parents, right? Because a relationship that a daughter-in-law has with her in-laws is always talked about. Oh, you should do this, you should do that. But I think we also need to talk about how the guy is, right, with his in-laws.
Right.
It's equally important, I think.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for being here. It was a very, very fulfilling conversation. I hope we can do this again.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you. It was great. And I hope to see you again.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to listen to all the episodes as they start getting released.
Thank you. And that's it for today. We'll come back again with another episode. Until then, take care.
Bye.
Bye.